My name is Charity. This story happened 12 years ago. Back then, I was 10 years old. I lived with my family in a small, quiet town near Madison, Wisconsin. Our town was so safe that people never even thought about locking their gates. Kids walked to school by themselves, and every neighbor knew each other's faces. Because of that, my parents occasionally felt comfortable leaving us home alone. That evening, it got dark very fast. My parents were planning to take the whole family to Target to shop for Easter. My two younger brothers were jumping up and down because they were excited to get candy, but I hated the idea of walking until my feet hurt through those endless store aisles. I asked if I could stay home and watch TV instead. My dad agreed, but he gave me a serious look and warned me, "Remember to lock the door, Charity, and absolutely do not open it for anyone. Do you hear me?" I nodded repeatedly, promising I would sit quietly on the sofa. After everyone left, I curled up in a blanket to watch cartoons. But about an hour later, I started craving something sweet. I glanced at the clock and then at the door. The gas station convenience store was less than a 10-minute walk away. I'll go fast and come right back. My parents will never know, I told myself. I locked the door, stuffed a key in my pocket, and hurried outside. The street was empty, but the streetlights were bright, which made me feel safe. I went into the store, quickly bought a bag of strawberry candies, and started heading back. About halfway home, I froze when I saw a man riding a bike up ahead. Right away, I felt like something was wrong. He was pedaling unsteadily, looking like he might be drunk. His hair was messy and his clothes were disheveled. Instinctively, I tried to walk as fast as I could to pass him, but the moment I stepped past him, he slammed on his brakes. He let out a loud shout that echoed through the empty street. "Hey, stop for a second!" I jumped, immediately feeling a sense of danger. Without thinking, I turned and ran. Right away, I heard the sound of the bike behind me. He had turned around and started chasing me. "Sweetie, wait up!" he yelled. My heart was pounding. I knew if I kept running on the main road, he would catch me. So I ducked into a small trail that cut through the edge of the woods behind the neighborhood. During the day, local kids used this as a shortcut, but at night, it was much darker and more terrifying. When I glanced back, I saw the man had ditched his bike and was chasing me on foot. "Wait, I have something to tell you." I ran for my life. When I finally saw my house, I almost cried with relief. But when I reached the door, my hands were shaking so hard, I nearly dropped the key. It took me several seconds of fumbling to get the door open. As soon as I was inside, I slammed it shut and locked it tight. I didn't dare turn on the lights for fear of being spotted. I crawled across the floor and hid right under the living room windowsill, peeking out through a tiny gap. Only a few seconds later, the man appeared. He stood right on the porch, separated from me by only a thin pane of glass. Under the dim porch light, his face looked pale and was dripping with sweat. He started knocking. At first it was a few soft taps, but then it got louder and harder. "Hey, open up. I just want to talk." Then he leaned his face right up against the glass, pressing his forehead to the door. His eyes darted back and forth, searching for any sign of me in the dark living room. He lowered his voice to a whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "Open the door, little girl. Can I have one of those pink candies?" The high-pitched giggle that followed was the most haunting sound I've ever heard. I sat huddled under the window, one hand clamped over my mouth to stifle my sobs, the other squeezing the bag of strawberry candies so hard they were crushed. Fortunately, at that exact moment, the headlights from my neighbor's car across the street shined directly into our yard. The man froze. He looked toward the car for a few seconds, then turned and vanished into the woods. I sat in the dark like a statue until my parents and brothers came home. When they walked in, I pretended I was just busy watching TV. I didn't say a single word about what had happened. Back then, I was more afraid of getting in trouble for sneaking out than I was of the man. I kept that secret buried, but since that night, I've never touched another piece of pink candy. It wasn't until I was 16, during an evening when the family was sitting by the fireplace, that I finally gathered the courage to tell my parents the truth. My dad went silent, and my mom turned pale. She pulled me into a hug and sobbed. She told me that knowing I had carried that terror alone for 6 years hurt her more than the incident itself. To this day, I still clearly remember the man's eyes, and I never leave the house alone after 9 p.m. Every Easter, when the grocery stores start filling up with colorful eggs and chocolate bunnies, my older brother looks at me with a smirk and asks, "Seeing any rabbits this year?" That joke started 20 years ago, on an Easter night when I was absolutely convinced I saw a giant monster bunny. I was about 6 or 7 years old at the time. My family lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment. My brother and I shared a room right across from my parents' room, separated by a narrow hallway shaped like an upside-down L. My parents had set up a bunk bed with a futon on the bottom for us. I slept on the top bunk and my brother slept below. The bed was positioned right in front of the door, meaning every time I opened my eyes and looked down, I had a clear view straight into the hallway. Back then, I had a totally irrational fear. I believed that if I slept with my head facing the door, monsters lurking in the hallway would eat my head first. So I always slept with my head toward the closet and my back to the door. My brother was the exact opposite. He slept bravely with his head facing the hallway. The incident happened early on Easter morning, around 3 or 4 a.m. Something woke me up. I felt unusually alert. I sat up and, breaking my own safety rule, I glanced out toward the hallway. My parents' door was cracked open just a bit, letting a faint sliver of light hit the hall. Right at the corner of the L-shaped hallway, I saw something sticking out. 2 long ears. My heart skipped a beat. I felt a surge of excitement. "The Easter Bunny!" I thought. I believed he was real and standing right outside my door. But that joy only lasted a few seconds. Those bunny ears kept getting longer and longer. Then, a massive rabbit face peeked out. The creature began to stand up straight. What started as a small shadow grew taller and taller until it hit the ceiling, taking up the entire height of the hallway. It was wearing a dark flannel shirt. Then I saw its eyes. 2 glowing red dots appeared in the dark. These weren't the friendly eyes of a stuffed bunny you'd find at the store. My excitement vanished instantly. A cold shiver ran down my spine. It turned its face toward me. Somehow, I knew it was staring right at me. And then it smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was a mouth full of countless long, sharp fangs packed closely together. The red light from its eyes reflected off those teeth, making them look like rows of tiny knives. I felt frozen for a few seconds. My body wouldn't move, and my throat felt tight. Then, my survival instinct kicked in. I screamed at the top of my lungs. My brother jumped up, startled and confused, having no clue what was happening. Then, my parents' door flew open. I heard heavy, fast footsteps hitting the hardwood floor. My dad charged into the hallway, toward me like a sprinter. In that exact moment, I saw my dad run right through the demonic rabbit, and it vanished instantly, like a puff of smoke. My mom followed behind him and flipped on the hallway light. The brightness filled the space, and everything suddenly looked normal. I stopped screaming, but I kept pointing. My parents and brother kept asking, "What happened? What's wrong?" I looked at the corner where the giant rabbit had been and was stunned. In that spot stood our coat rack. Hanging on it was my dad's dark flannel shirt, draped a bit crookedly. Above the rack, hanging on a small nail on the wall, were 2 paper bunny ears my mom had made for the party the next morning. The glowing red eyes were actually 2 tiny LED lights on a battery charger plugged into a nearby outlet. They blinked as they charged, and while the red light was weak, it looked incredibly bright in the pitch black. As for the mouth of fangs, it was just the shadow of the coat hooks and some power cords hitting the wall. From my angle on the top bunk, combined with the dim light from my parents' room, the shadows overlapped into that terrifying shape. "Robert, what is it?" I snapped out of it when I heard my mom ask again. I was still shaking, covered in tears and snot, trying to explain the ceiling-high rabbit with red eyes and fangs. My brother burst out laughing and fell back onto his bed. My parents just looked at me with a "here we go again" expression. Later, my brother told me that all he saw was me sitting on the bed, pointing at a coat rack and screaming like I was in a horror movie. I was the only one who saw the monster because of the silly way I usually slept. The next morning, things went back to normal. I sat at the table feeling a mix of embarrassment and lingering fear. Then, a second horror appeared. My mom brought out a basket of candy and set it on the table. She opened the lid and stared inside for a few seconds. Then she looked up at me. That look made me feel colder than the rabbit did. Half the candy was gone. My mom didn't even have to ask. I immediately confessed to sneaking it the afternoon before. She sighed and calmly concluded that a 6-year-old who eats that much sugar before bed is bound to imagine monsters at 3 a.m. More than 20 years have passed. Every Easter, that story gets retold like a family legend. To be honest, the scariest thing about that night wasn't the giant red-eyed rabbit. It was the fact that my mom banned me from eating candy before bed for the next 3 years. For a 6-year-old, that was the real curse.
It all started when my father got a job as an assistant principal at a private high school in the town of Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Along with the job came a free house, just 3 blocks from the school. My family quickly moved to our new place. I was 15 at the time, incredibly excited for a new life. The house my dad was given was much grander than we had imagined. My mom kept raving about the spacious kitchen and the living room with its brick fireplace. But everything began from the very first day. I felt like something was off with how people in the neighborhood behaved. They still cheerfully greeted us, but their eyes avoided direct contact. My first week at the new school, I tried to fit in. All my classmates welcomed me when the teacher introduced me, but during breaks, they kept their distance. Until I met Grace. "You're the new assistant principal's son, aren't you?" "I'm Grace." "Welcome to Rhode Island," Grace asked, her voice gentle. Everything became easier with Grace by my side. She showed me everything about this small town, helping me get used to the new environment faster. Grace asked me how it felt to move to a new city. She listened very carefully when I spoke. "Can I come over to your house?" Grace's naturalness and initiative surprised me, but I was also very happy. I immediately agreed. Grace came to my house one afternoon. I saw her through my bedroom window. I was about to call out loudly, but then I felt a little curious about Grace's demeanor. She stood in front of the door for quite a while, observing the entire house before ringing the doorbell. When I opened the door, Grace didn't step inside right away. Instead, she looked at the space within with a distant expression. "Which room are you in?" Grace asked as we walked in. "The corner room on the second floor," I replied. Grace nodded. "So, you're in the same spot as he was?" I looked at her blankly, not understanding what Grace meant. She smiled slightly, then walked straight upstairs. I followed, feeling a bit confused. Even more surprising, Grace seemed to know the house very well. She pointed to the corner of my room and said, "Lisa's bed was here, and her desk was next to the window. Before there used to be a small bathroom next to Lisa's room too." "Grace, what are you talking about? Who's Lisa?" "She was my best friend. Lisa's family used to live here, but not in this house." Grace looked around the room with sad eyes. "Where is Lisa now?" "She died." The answer shocked me quite a bit. Grace said it again, her tone very calm. "A big fire happened. She and her 2 younger brothers didn't make it." A chill ran down my spine. 2 years ago. This house was owned by the previous assistant principal, the one your dad is replacing. After the fire, there were many rumors that the spirits of the former residents still haunted the house. People in town often avoided this place. Children weren't allowed to go near it. Now I understood why everyone had been acting so strangely towards my family. We were living in a house built on the foundation of a tragedy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Lisa and her two younger brothers. They had died right in this room. I felt the air was colder than usual. But that's only half of the truth, Grace said, looking at me for a long time, then said something that chilled me to the bone. Those words echoed in my head for days afterward. I begged Grace to tell me the whole truth. Grace hesitated for quite a while before she began. Mr. Harrison was the assistant principal before your father. He had 3 children, Lisa, who was my age and yours, Mark, 10, and Danny, 8. Their family lived in that house for over 10 years. There was a student named Ryan Brooks. He was a troubled kid from a family with many problems. Mr. Harrison often kept Ryan after school, supposedly for tutoring. But what happened wasn't normal tutoring. Mr. Harrison had been abusing Ryan for months. Lisa, Mr. Harrison's eldest daughter, knew about this but didn't dare to speak up. Ryan cried for help. He told his homeroom teacher, even wrote letters to the school board, but no one believed him. Mr. Harrison was a respected, reputable man in town, and Ryan was just a troubled child from a broken home. One afternoon, Ryan couldn't take it anymore. He took his father's pistol and went to Mr. Harrison's house. In his private office, Ryan shot and killed Mr. Harrison. Ryan then set the house on fire to erase all traces, and all 5 members of Mr. Harrison's family perished. Ryan left a long confession letter detailing the abuse and why he had to do it, but it was kept secret to protect the school's reputation. Grace and I went to see my father to tell him everything. Dad listened and was lost in thought for many days afterward. He didn't ask again, nor did he express any doubt. About a month later, Dad announced our family would be leaving. Dad had other plans and wouldn't be working in education anymore. He placed a hand on my shoulder and smiled gently. I didn't ask anything further. Not because I understood, but because at that time, I chose to follow my dad. I chose to leave instead of facing any other horrible truth. Later, I understood. Dad stayed silent because he struggled with a choice, a comfortable life or a peaceful one. If our family had stayed there, the whispers and rumors would have continued. We couldn't live normally after knowing all the truth. My family moved away. Grace's family did too. Everything would truly end. The tragedy had taken too many lives. They needed to rest in peace. But I still keep the photo Grace gave me. Every time I see it, I think of Grace, my friend who endured that sorrow alone. I decided to tell this story because I understand that sometimes the truth needs to be told, even if it's too late. It can't change anything, just for the person carrying it to feel lighter. I've moved twice since leaving Cassville, but I still feel uneasy every time I see a police patrol car. My name is Donnie, 38 years old. After my divorce last year, I decided to move back to my family's old house in rural Cassville, Ohio. I thought a quiet place would help me find my balance again after my broken marriage. The house had been empty for almost 10 years since my mother passed away, so it needed a lot of repairs. That was good. It gave me something to keep my mind busy. I started with simple things, painting the walls, replacing the pipes, fixing the roof. But the thing I wanted to do most was build a privacy fence along the edge of the backyard, which bordered a dense forest. After finishing the work inside the house, I started digging holes for the fence posts. The soil was quite soft here, and I figured it would take about 3 days to finish the fence. That afternoon, while digging near the left side of the house, my shovel hit something hard. At first I thought it was a rock, but when I cleared away the surrounding dirt, I saw a curved ivory-colored shape. It looked like a large piece of bone. I continued to dig and found more pieces. Probably deer bones, I thought, since there were a lot of wild animals in this area. But as I dug deeper, what appeared stunned me. It was a piece of a skull. I was sure of it because there were eye sockets. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone to call the police. I reported what I had found. The dispatcher said an officer would be there to check it out soon. About 20 minutes later, only one officer arrived. He introduced himself as Sheriff Dalton. I led him to the backyard and pointed to the hole. Dalton looked down, didn't seem to think it was a big deal, and nodded. Probably a cow or a hunting dog. I pointed to the skull piece. He leaned down for a closer look, then stood back up with an unchanged expression. Trust me, I've seen a lot of things like this. Dalton offered to help me clean up, but I refused. I said I could handle it myself. He looked at me for a long time, then nodded and left. I hammered the post into the ground as planned and didn't bother to dig up the bone pieces anymore. They were already there anyway, and moving them would just be a hassle. The next morning, I was making coffee in the kitchen when I heard a knock on the door. I was surprised to see Dalton standing on the porch. He was in plain clothes and holding 2 cups of coffee, smiling as if we were old friends. We sat on the front porch. Dalton talked about the weather and my house repairs. After a while of small talk, he asked, "Have you ever thought about selling the house?" The question was so unexpected that I stopped drinking my coffee. "I just moved back here." "I know, but this place is quite isolated. A single man like you might get lonely." Dalton paused and I said nothing, still surprised. "I could buy this house with cash, no complicated paperwork." I refused without thinking. Dalton was silent for a long time, sipping his coffee and looking out at the forest behind the house. "Okay, but just think about it. Maybe you'll change your mind." As Dalton left, I stood at the window watching his car drive away. When the car turned onto the main road, I noticed red mud stuck to the wheel wells. It was the same kind of mud from my backyard. A sense of unease crept in. I went to the backyard immediately to check. There were tire tracks in the dirt. They were definitely from a car. I stood there stunned for a while, filled with all kinds of suspicions and doubts. I spent the whole day thinking about the bones in the backyard and Sheriff Dalton's strange attitude. That night, I decided to call Jason, a college friend who was now a forensic technician in Columbus. I told him about what I had found. I just said I didn't trust the local police. Jason agreed to drive down on the weekend to check the bone samples. Jason arrived on Saturday morning. I led him to the backyard and pointed to the exact spot of the hole. The surface of the ground was perfectly flat. I was already a little bewildered at that point. We started digging. From the very first shovelful, I felt something was different. The dirt was much harder than I remembered, as if it had been compacted with a machine. It took us almost 2 hours to dig down to the same depth as before. But to our surprise, there was nothing there. Not a single piece of bone. I stood there, breathing heavily, with a shocked expression. Jason wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at me. "Donnie, stress from a divorce can make people see things that aren't there." I didn't know what to say. The bones were gone, but I was sure they had been there. I clearly remembered the chilling feeling on my skin when I touched the skull. I decided not to look into it any further. There was no evidence to back up my story. No one but me and Sheriff Dalton had seen those bones, and based on his strange behavior, I was certain Dalton was involved. A month later, I put the house up for sale. I couldn't stay there anymore. Every night I felt like someone was watching me from the forest behind the house. An elderly couple from Cleveland bought the house. They were retired and wanted a quiet place to live. I felt guilty watching them excitedly talk about their plans to garden in the backyard, but I didn't say anything. I just wanted to get out of there. I was 15 at the time, living a peaceful life with my family in Portland, Maine. I only had 2 close friends, Greg and Mark. Mark had just moved to Portland a year ago. Despite his quiet and sometimes strange personality, we became an inseparable trio. That Labor Day, Greg excitedly announced a short trip to a small island in Casco Bay. Greg said his parents wanted to invite us along. We immediately agreed. But as much as I was looking forward to it, the trip didn't go so smoothly, at least for me. I had a cold from the night before, and I was sneezing and blowing my nose the entire long drive. Mark and I also argued about some trivial things. but we were used to it, as we often did that. The ferry ride to Long Island was the only enjoyable experience of the day. I stood at the railing, feeling the sea breeze, and watched the seagulls flying overhead. For the first time all day, I felt relaxed. Greg's family's house wasn't too big, but it was still comfortable and well-equipped. The first day passed normally. We rode bikes to explore the island, went swimming, and played soccer on the beach. But on the second day, I couldn't find my favorite Yankees cap. To me, that item was more precious than anything. Greg said maybe I had left it on the beach, but I distinctly remembered putting it on the nightstand before I went to bed. In the afternoon, one of the pens from my collection also disappeared. It was a special pen with my name engraved on it. I started to feel uneasy. Personal belongings couldn't just vanish like that. That night was when things got weird. I woke up and saw that it was still dark, so I lay still, trying to go back to sleep. But then I heard a noise. Listening more closely, it was a whisper. I strained my ears to listen. It was coming from the bunk bed above me, where Mark was sleeping. But I couldn't make out what he was saying. I guessed he was talking in his sleep. We had a lot of activities during the day, and were pretty tired. After a while, the whispering stopped. I fell back asleep without even realizing it. The next day, we were playing volleyball on the court for a while when Mark said he needed to go to the bathroom. I continued playing with Greg. A few minutes later, I looked up at the house. In one of the second-story windows, I saw Mark's face staring down at the court. I blinked, and Mark was gone. I asked Greg if his house had a bathroom on the second floor. Greg looked at me strangely and said there was only one bathroom downstairs. That evening, as Greg's family was getting ready to go to a local restaurant for dinner, I pretended to be sick so I could stay at the house. When everyone had left, I lay on my bed and thought. The whispering last night, Mark's face in the window, the missing items. Then a terrible thought occurred to me. I decided to check Mark's bed. My jaw dropped when I found my Yankees cap in his bag. I rummaged through it and found a bunch of my personal items that I didn't even know were missing. There was a pair of nail clippers my mom had packed for me, along with my spare toothbrush, and most alarmingly, a pair of my underwear. I didn't know what to think. I was about to cry when I noticed something else in the bag. His notebook. To this day, I regret picking up that notebook. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. They were pencil drawings. Monsters with sharp teeth, nightmarish creatures with multiple legs and eyes, and scenes of horrific violence. People being run over by cars, stabbed, cut up, and tortured. There were also images of creatures that looked like winged, horned demons. But what stunned me were the last few pages. They were all drawings of me in different positions, but all of them were terrifying, including an image of me being nailed to a cross with my legs missing. Another page just had my name, David, scribbled over and over again, as if Mark had sat there for hours just writing my name. The last page was what was truly haunting. At the top of the page was my name, written in large capital letters, David. Below it was a smaller handwritten note, I will do it tomorrow. I dropped the notebook. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. When I heard the car returning, I quickly put everything back in the bag, except for the notebook. I needed the evidence. When everyone was asleep, I pulled Greg's dad out into the hallway and whispered everything to him. At first, he didn't believe me until I showed him Mark's notebook. Greg's dad also found it alarming. He told me to put everything back as it was. When I put the notebook back, I tore out one page. Greg's dad then told everyone that there was a family emergency and that we had to end the trip early. As we hurriedly packed our things, I could feel Mark's eyes staring at me. The ferry ride back to the mainland was the longest of my life. Mr. Tom dropped Mark off at his house first. On the way to my house, he told me that he had spoken with Mark's parents and that it would be best if I didn't tell my parents about this because the two families were very close, but I couldn't keep it a secret. As soon as I walked into the house, I burst into tears and told my parents everything. They were furious and called the police immediately. I had to tell the story to the police 3 times. The page I had torn from the notebook was used as evidence to get a search warrant. They found the notebook and all of my belongings, except for the pen, which was never found. My parents never mentioned it again after that. I never saw Mark again. His family moved away within a month. I also never spoke to Greg after that trip because my parents were so angry that Greg's dad wanted to keep everything a secret. Now, every time I think back, I still get shivers remembering Mark's eyes and the last pages of that notebook. I wonder if I hadn't pretended to be sick and stayed home that day, would I still be here to tell this story?
My name's Mike. I'm a third-year student of Eastern Washington University. My best friend's Jim. We knew one another from the same college class. In the summer of the first year in the university, we planned a trip to the unknown, the places which not many people even knew existed. After a brief survey, we came toward a small village just 2 hours away from our university in Trout Creek, Washington. Surrounding the village was the vast wilderness, stretching its greenery from end to end. The entire population was just about a few hundred. We were excited about the trip, so we dived straight in after 3 days of paperwork. We started at 3 p.m. and arrived to our destination at around 5 p.m. The sunset here was breathtaking, prompting us to breathe in all of that fresh air. The road leading to the village was just a small trail, so we decided to park our ride at the entrance and walked in. We walked in slowly, looking around the place with curious city boy's eyes. After quite a while, we still hadn't spotted any houses. I myself was pretty exhausted, while my companion Jim was still full of energy. I suddenly tripped on a stone and fell. It was quite a huge fall from grace for me, one that Jim made great effort to make fun of. Yes, he did pull me up, but the laughter kinda killed it. Feeling annoyed, I picked up that rock to take a closer look at the perpetrator for my fall. It was a rather rounded, rugged piece of rock, the main reason for my loss of footing. But the more I looked at it, the less of a rock it felt like. Jim, seeing me struggle to pick up the rock, jested. "Don't tell me you started having a personal vendetta with this one, Mikey." Jim then plucked out the thick layer of dirt covering the rock, exposing a jaw full of teeth that was clearly of human origin. All the hair on my neck stood straight up. The tense atmosphere quickly enveloped the surrounding, turning the place from a peaceful wilderness into a creepy wild land. Jim immediately tossed the rock away, then laughed to ward off the sunken mood, though it wasn't very effective at all. "We shouldn't think much of it, dude. Let's continue on our way." We continued our journey toward the village, sunken in our own thoughts and saying nothing. As we arrived at the village, the local residents greeted us with warmth and hospitality. It was also dinner time, so we enjoyed the local delicacy. We were glued to the lamb soup, the best local dish. It's cooked in a large earthenware cauldron over firewood for many hours, large enough to require 3 to 4 grown men to carry the pot around. Spices were also made from local ingredients, a true homebrew delicacy indeed. I noticed that there were not a lot of children in the village. Most people here were adults and only a few elderly people. Their hospitality and friendliness warmed us up. After a hefty dinner, we were gathering around the bonfire, sitting, dancing, and enjoying beside the flame. We were arranged to have our lodging at the village chief's residence. Our cell phone reception here was pretty poor, so we're not able to use our phones much. After some time talking, we fell asleep. Suddenly, in the middle of the night at around 3 a.m., I was awakened by the sound of children's laughter. They were super loud and seemed like there were a lot of them kids around the outside. Why the heck were them kids playing at this very late hour? I glanced down on my phone, annoyed by this. And where were all the adults letting this happen? I tried to bear with it and waited by slowly for the adults to take the kids home. But after a very long time without any stopping of the commotion, I had enough. So I decided to go outside and tell them kids to leave. But strangely, when I opened up the door outside, there was absolutely no one around. And even though the laughter's still echoing all over the place, I was standing there, dumbfounded by the discovery, staring motionless to the darkness, when Jim's voice jolted me back to reality. "Dude, what are you doing here?" But before I had the chance to tell him, another lower, hoarser voice echoed from behind us. "There's regulation that nobody here opens the front door and leaves the house before 6 a.m. Please close the door and return to your bed, you two." The stern look and tough voice of the village chief were vastly different than the time he greeted us. Jim and I, without any word, quickly returned to our room. Jim immediately fell asleep, while I was not able to sleep the entire night. In my head, the children's laughter and the cold demeanor of the village chief discomforted me. The next morning, the warmth and peace returned to the village. Jim and I followed the locals to the field, watching them grow their crops. There were neat stacks of green vegetables that greatly interested us. Meanwhile, I was planning to ask the village chief personally about what happened last night. The local said that agriculture was the stable food source that maintained the village for many, many years now. One day, however, there was a locust storm that devastated the crops and homes after only one day, right at the moment before everything was ripened enough for harvest. It was a really tough time. The survivors had to gather everything even remotely edible from leaves, barks, and roots. Hunger made them lose control and famine finished the rest. A few children couldn't make it through due to severe malnutrition. So in order to stay alive, the villagers decided to slaughter the last 3 lambs to make it through the famine. That was the origin story of the local delicacy we enjoyed yesterday. At the end of a long, laborious morning, the villagers returned to the community dining hall to have lunch and some well-earned rest. Of course, the lamb soup was among the food served there. I saw that everyone in here seemed to love this signature dish with all their hearts and minds, to the point of slurping until the very last drops. I asked the village chief why there's not any shepherd around here despite the lamb soup. He smiled and said that this soup was very special. It would never run out. Many years had passed since the time they slaughtered their last lambs. The same flavor was still there. I had stopped eating by then, staring down on my bowl. Emotions went all over the place for me. I threw a glance towards Jim. He'd finished his bowl in one big gulp. I quickly elbowed him it's time to move on, before promptly packing our things and literally dragging Jim out of there as soon as possible. He was super surprised by my quick action and threw question after question at me. Waiting till we were in the clear and our reception returned, I called the police. I explained to Jim that there wasn't any lamb soup at all. I had glanced down onto the pot, seeing only one broken down skull of a lamb. The rest of them were human skulls, children's skulls to be exact. The rock we stumbled across earlier was of that exact size, and that explained the severe lack of children within the village's vicinity.
I used to work as an assistant director for a cable television network in California. We specialized in producing shows that explored paranormal phenomena. The job had a good salary, flexible hours, and sometimes I even met a few celebrities. I thought I would stick with this career for a long time. That summer, we were assigned to film a special episode at an abandoned mental hospital outside the city. Our guest was a rising pop singer. I'll call her Madison to protect her image. Honestly, Madison's gentle image wasn't a good fit for these kinds of shows, but her management company wanted her to appear on our program to create a new, edgier impression. Madison was very popular at the time. I remember the planning meeting where our executive producer said this was a golden opportunity and we had to be absolutely meticulous. The filming day was near the end of August. It was unusually hot, even as it got close to evening. Our entire crew had 8 people. The director, the cameraman, lighting, sound, me, and 3 other production assistants. Madison arrived 2 hours late accompanied by her personal assistant and makeup artist. She smiled, waved to everyone, and apologized for the delay. We started filming on the third floor, which used to be the isolation treatment area. The hallway was long, lined with small rooms that had rusted iron doors. The smell of mold and dampness was overwhelming. Madison acted quite well. The initial script had her screaming when she heard a noise and clutching the male host's arm. Everything went normally until we entered room 17. The walls were peeling, the concrete floor was cracked, and a rusty iron bed frame sat in the corner. The air inside felt heavy and suffocating. I wasn't the only one who felt it. I noticed the cameraman looked uncomfortable, constantly shifting how he held the camera. The director cued us to start filming. Madison walked into the middle of the room as instructed. According to the script, she was supposed to read a few lines about how she felt, but Madison just stood still. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. The director asked if she was okay. She didn't answer. Then, her head began to tilt to the right, slowly, like a puppet whose strings were being pulled. Next, her eyes opened unusually wide, and both pupils rolled back until only the whites were showing. Each eye was looking in a completely different direction. Her face started to distort. One cheek drooped down while the other side scrunched up, making her face look twisted. I had never seen a human face contort like that before. "Madison?" her assistant screamed. But the person standing in the middle of the room wasn't Madison anymore. A guttural roar erupted. It sounded like an elderly man being choked. Then, she charged toward us with terrifying speed. One sound guy who was standing closest couldn't get out of the way fast enough. She grabbed his shirt tightly. Madison bit hard into his arm. I swear I heard a cracking sound. The sound guy screamed in agony. Her assistant and another production assistant rushed in to pull Madison away, but she was unbelievably strong. Madison flung her assistant, who fell hard into a corner. The other PA tried to hold her back and was bitten on the shoulder. With a tearing sound, most of the young man's ear was ripped, left dangling and bleeding non-stop. Everyone was screaming. The director yelled for an ambulance. The cameraman was still filming. I don't know if it was professional instinct or if he was too shocked to move. I stood frozen, my feet feeling glued to the ground. Then, the heavy smell of waste filled the air. Madison, with her face still distorted and still growling, had urine streaming down her legs. Everyone was horrified. A few seconds later, another foul smell appeared. She had also defecated. None of us dared to get close. We didn't even dare to move, afraid she would go completely insane again. After a few minutes, Madison suddenly collapsed. Her body went limp, like all her bones had been removed. We waited a few more minutes before daring to approach. By then, Madison was awake. She looked at the scene around her, then at herself, but showed absolutely no expression. Then she asked in a normal voice, "Have we started filming yet?" The ambulance arrived and took the 2 bitten crew members to the hospital. Madison was taken away by her management company. There were no police and no official investigation. Everything was handled discreetly because a celebrity was involved. The next day, I received a call from the network executives. The man's voice on the other end was cold. The show was completely canceled. All the footage had to be destroyed. No one was allowed to mention this incident in any form. A non-disclosure agreement, NDA, would be sent to everyone. That same afternoon, we signed the NDA. We didn't ask any questions. Anyone in this industry is used to keeping secrets. About a week later, we heard news that the sound guy, the first person she bit, had been in a car accident. He was driving on the highway and suddenly swerved straight into the median barrier. He survived, but had 3 broken ribs and a concussion. He told the police that he saw a woman with a distorted face sitting in the back seat through his rearview mirror. A few months after that, the production assistant whose ear was bitten was found collapsed in his apartment. His neighbors said they heard terrible screaming and quickly called the police. When they broke down the door, he was seizing on the floor, foaming at the mouth, with his eyes rolled back. He was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. I heard he couldn't speak anymore. He just made growling noises. As for me, after the incident, I struggled to sleep. I often dreamed of Madison's distorted image. I started being afraid of the dark. My mind constantly imagined ghosts and demons. I requested a transfer to another department, taking a simple administrative job. One time I ran into Madison's personal assistant at a coffee shop. She was much thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. "You don't look well?" I asked. Madison's assistant nodded slightly. She was taking a lot of medication. Even before we filmed that episode, she was under so much pressure and had a brutal schedule from the company. They kept piling on rules, contracts, and clauses. The pills helped her keep it together for a while, until they weren't enough anymore. I knew the she the assistant was talking about was Madison. I didn't say anything, choosing to listen silently. But what happened in that room was the result of having to hold on for too long. She really just broke. At this point, the assistant broke down crying. I sat with her until she calmed down and didn't ask anything else. Madison stopped appearing publicly. Her career was virtually frozen after the incident. There were rumors she was in treatment at a private psychiatric facility on the East Coast. Some people said she had left the entertainment industry for good. I worked until the end of that month and then quit my job. I'm no longer sure if what we witnessed that day was a paranormal phenomenon or just the result of a mind pushed to its absolute limit. But I know that since that day, I no longer look at the entertainment industry or people in the same way. There are nights I still wake up to the sound of that crash. But what haunts me the most isn't the accident, it's what happened afterward. I grew up in a coal camp in a small town in West Virginia. We lived in a working-class neighborhood. My parents worked hard to make a living, and I lived with my 5 siblings. Our town was also very small. It was so small that it eventually merged with a bigger town and no longer exists. Jim Hatfield, who would later become my husband, came from a very wealthy family. His family owned almost all the timber companies in West Virginia, even nearly half the state. Despite being the heir to the family fortune, Jim didn't want to continue his family's timber business. Instead, he chose to work in the coal mines, just like many other workers. This is where he met my father. After a few weeks of working together, Jim asked my father if he could date me. Despite worrying about the wealth gap between our families, my father agreed. Over the next few months, Jim took me on several dates. Everything seemed to be going very well. One night, after getting drunk at a bar, Jim couldn't drive himself home. He was so drunk he couldn't stand up, slurring his words and asking me to drive him. That's when our story took a turn I never could have expected. As we were driving home, a man suddenly stepped out in front of the car. I didn't have time to brake, and in an instant, the car hit him. Despite being drunk, Jim seemed calm. Jim told me to switch to the passenger seat. Then he got up, dragged the man's body off the road, put it in the trunk, and continued to drive. He took me onto a dirt road where we arrived at a wooden house. I wondered how a person who was so drunk just moments ago could lift a heavy body and drive so carefully. I thought maybe the fear had made him sober up instantly. Jim told me I needed to go with him up the mountain and that he had a plan. When we got to the top of the mountain, there was a secluded cabin. Jim said it was his family's cabin and that he wanted me to stay there for a few weeks. He explained that he owned a 1955 Mercedes Gullwing and that he was one of only 5 people in the entire county who had one. Jim said that people would eventually notice the man was missing, and if there were any car parts on the road from the accident, all suspicion would fall on him. If the other owners had alibis, then I, as the driver when Jim was drunk, would be charged with murder. At that moment, I wasn't clear-headed enough to think or calculate anything. I agreed with everything Jim suggested and wrote a letter to my parents. The purpose was to make them think I was visiting a friend in Tennessee and would be back in a few weeks. During my time at the cabin, I had everything I needed. Jim brought me food and other supplies, but I wasn't comfortable at all. The first few days in the cabin, I could barely sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man appearing in front of the car. The loud noise when the car hit him kept ringing in my head. The nights were the worst. Every sound made me jump. Sometimes I thought I heard the footsteps of that man, as if his soul was looking for me. Jim said everything would be okay, but I knew it would never be okay. I had caused a man's death. About 2 months passed. Jim said everything was fine and that I could go home. My peaceful life from before had completely disappeared. Every time I left the house, I felt like hundreds of eyes were staring at me. I kept thinking everyone knew about that night. Maybe someone saw me and Jim driving away in the dark. I always kept my head down, avoiding eye contact with others. Every conversation made me nervous. When someone asked me where I had been for 2 months, my heart would pound. The sound of footsteps behind me always made me jump. I would turn my head to look back, trying to control my movements so no one would notice. At that moment, I thought, is the police following me? Do they suspect something? Then one day, Jim proposed to me. I wasn't completely comfortable with this marriage, but I also loved Jim and felt his sincerity. Jim also held that terrible secret, and I agreed. Life seemed to be stable and happy. I didn't have to worry about money anymore. I could even help my family. I found out I was pregnant shortly after. One day, I went to the local doctor for a checkup, and I happened to see the man who was the victim in the car accident. I couldn't believe my eyes. He was standing there, healthy, as if nothing had ever happened. I was so shocked that I couldn't stand up and told the receptionist to take me home. I was nauseous all day, waiting for Jim to come home to tell him what I had seen. To be honest, I had never asked Jim where he buried the man. This is where everything went crazy. Jim told me that it was all a test. Because he came from a wealthy family, he wanted to find a truly loyal woman, one who didn't love him for his money. I stood there, my mouth open, unable to believe what I had just heard. For months, I lived in a nightmare, tormenting myself, thinking I had taken a person's life. I had sleepless nights, staring into the darkness and seeing the man's face. I felt guilt eating away at my soul every day, every hour. I cried and screamed at Jim. The anger and pain mixed into an emotion I couldn't describe. I didn't know whether to feel relieved that I wasn't a murderer or angry that I had been so cruelly deceived. Despite feeling utterly betrayed, despite wanting to scream in anger and helplessness, I still stayed with him. Maybe it was because I was pregnant and what was called family kept me there. We had 3 children after that. I have to admit that to this day, we have a family that has everything. Jim truly loves me and our children, but those terrifying memories are something I can never forget.
My name's Owen. I'm 32 years old. I'm married for a year now. Me and my wife, we're residing in Long Island. We are living in a rather old house. According to our knowledge, we're the 4th owner of the estate, existed for 30 years now. As all newlyweds, we're not rich, so both of us decided to pick up this estate, being the most affordable for us. The house is rather sturdy, even after many decades. The only catch was its rather old-fashioned design. Whoever built this lodging and owned it first must be someone rather wealthy. However, after 6 months residing here, there were strange things that occurred to us that defied all logical explanation. One evening, my wife and I were having our time watching movies in the living room. It was a rom-com, which was ruined at the climactic moment as I noticed something in the corner of my eyes, enough to startle me to a yelp. "What's going on?" My wife, also startled, asked me back. "There's a pale woman behind the TV, hon." She just laughed it off, saying that I'm seeing things, despite the fact that I have tried to describe that woman for her. Pale white figure, sunken eyes, but she wasn't buying it, telling me that I was hallucinating things that weren't there. Another time, I had to relieve myself in the middle of the night. When I was in front of the sink and watching myself in the mirror, she came to me again. She was right there behind my back, and this time, I was able to see her more clearly. Emaciated, pale, with sunken eyes. The sight was more than enough to send me running to a panic attack. The third time I saw her was when I was cleaning the floor. She was walking rather heavily, slowly toward the basement behind the main house. She was wearing a long dress, the type of which went out of fashion many years ago. Singing along the way, with her haunting voice echoing along the hallways, she looked pregnant with swollen abdomen. This time my wife did consider what I told her, but she instead thought of me having psychological issues due to overworking. Why the heck am I the only person seeing things when my wife's immune to that shit? So I decided to purchase a more modern house in downtown area with a 20-year payment plan terms. I would go nuts staying here any longer. The house now I'll redecorate and put it for rent. To fasten the paces, I chose the hourly rate cleaning service. There were too many things to clean up here, so it took more than a day to complete. With cleaning up complete, we have finally decided on what to carry forward and what to discard. However, the two cleaning staffs said about a rather heavy metal chest in the basement that they would like to have me help in carrying it upstairs. I knew about this chest the day we moved in, but due to it being very heavy, we decided to leave it there for good. It took all four of us a lot of work to finally haul it out of the basement area. With things finally arranged, except for the heavy chest, we could finally rest. Tomorrow I'd deal with it. Likely it would need to be towed away. That was our final night here at the old house. However, weird things started to come up again. There's a lot of creepy sounds coming from the metal chest. First was the weeping of a woman. Then came loud bangs echoing from within the chest. Last but not least, the wailing of a child wheezing from within the accursed object. I could barely sleep while my wife's sleeping soundly that night. The next morning, having enough of it, I decided to open it up. My wife nagged at me for being unreasonable, but I couldn't stand it any longer. I felt an urge to open it up, to come to terms with all of my suffering. So I pried it open with all my strength. A nasty smell from within assaulted my sense of smell, gagged me up, forced me to vomit under such nauseating stench. My wife threw me a look of concern. For her, I was being unreasonable, and now was reaping the consequences. After calming myself down, I decided to look inside the chest, and immediately regret that decision. The first thing I saw was human feet, then arms, and finally, a human face. All was submerged within a fluid of something like paint. Now thinking back, I wished I did have a mental issue like my wife said. At least I could forget what I'd seen there. So I called the police, fighting the nausea the entire time. The police said it was the body of a woman. She was heavily pregnant at the 9th month by the time she was dead. Needless to say, we were in a state of shock and panic at the news. She was found shrunken to a fetal position, still clutching within the out-of-fashion long dress. The same one that I had seen her in the mirror with. After thorough examinations, they found the chest originated from an industrial factory only 12 miles away. However, the chest model was out of commission a decade ago already. Me and my wife, we also provided the information of the previous owner to the police. They quickly found the third and second owner after backtracking, tracing it up to the very first owner. The two previous owners claimed that the chest had always been there when they moved in. That thing, however, was so heavy that they all decided to just leave it there, and then it was forgotten. So the police searched for the first owner. His name's Thomas, the builder of this house and also the owner of that previously mentioned factory. However, he'd passed away 3 years ago due to a heart attack. Thomas had a wife and a son who's almost 30 years old now. After mentioning about the body in the chest, they claimed no knowledge about that. Thomas divorced his wife when his son was only 4 years of age. She's been living away for all this time, only receiving alimony arrangement from her previous husband. Because it was related to Thomas, the body within was likely his mistress. So the police suggested a DNA test of the unborn child and Thomas's son. The match was solid at 25%. They were indeed half-siblings. The case, however, was only 50% completed. There's still a lot of questions going unanswered, like who's the killer and what's the motive for the killing. But the most haunting for me was when I was looking at Thomas's picture. He and I were uncannily familiar. I'm Sophia, 33 years old. My husband is Liam, 34 years old. My husband and I live in New York. We've been married for 4 years but have not planned to have children. I'm a successful woman with a high-paying job. Lately, I've been so busy with work that my husband and I haven't had much time to spend together. I felt Liam's coldness. On a 5-day business trip to California, I told Liam to arrange work to go with me. Both a business trip and a trip for the couple to warm up their relationship. But Liam seemed very hesitant about that suggestion, and I had to try to convince him. We rented a room at a luxury hotel near Coronado Beach. During the day, I will go handle work, leaving Liam at the hotel to explore everything around. Only at night do we have time for each other. Creepy things at this hotel begin to happen. The first night, I was startled awake when I heard the sound of water running in the toilet. It was about 12 o'clock. I think the hotel's water system has a problem. The sound of running water stopped for about 2 minutes. I was also quite tired after a day of work, so I went back to sleep right after. But on the second night, I heard a knocking sound coming from the closet door. At that time, I couldn't sleep because I was reviewing documents to send to my partner. That knocking sound followed by the rhythm of 3 consecutive sounds with a pause between each time. My heart beat faster with each knock. I'm a very shy person, so I didn't dare go up to see what was inside the cabinet. Hurriedly jumping onto the bed, I tried to shake Liam vigorously. But my husband sleeps very soundly. No matter what, he doesn't wake up. The knocking stopped. I was scared and covered myself with the blanket, hugged Liam tightly and tried to close my eyes to sleep. Things haven't stopped yet. On the third night, I woke up in the middle of the night. Turning to the side, I couldn't see Liam anywhere. I called Liam, no response. I ran to the bathroom and couldn't find him. I was scared and turned on all the lights in the room. I picked up the phone and called Liam many times, but the phone said it couldn't be reached. The clock showed it was after 2 a.m. Checking that Liam's room card and shoes were still there, I panicked. I didn't dare sleep alone in the room anymore. I quickly ran down to the reception hall to sit. Unable to sleep all night, I went up to my room feeling tired and exhausted at 7 a.m. When I entered the room, I was startled to see Liam sleeping soundly on the bed. I called Liam up and asked him where he went last night and when he returned to his room. Liam looked at me blankly. "I slept in the room all night last night. What's wrong with you?" I fell into a state of shock. What the hell is going on? Could it be that I'm being blinded by a ghost? I shuddered at that thought. That day I took a break because my mind was too stressed and I couldn't stay awake. Liam wanted to go out for a walk on the beach for a while and told me to rest. I lay in bed listening to relaxing music. After a while, the knocking sound came again. I jumped up in surprise and stared towards the wardrobe.
Slowly getting out of bed, I gently walked to the wardrobe. It was around 10 a.m. I was no longer afraid, but instead felt angry. I wanted to see what the hell was haunting me these past few nights. I opened the closet door really hard, but inside were just 2 bathrobes and nothing else. I was bewildered, not understanding what was going on when the knocking sounded again. It comes from the left corner of the cabinet. I reached out and gently pushed the corner of the cabinet. The wooden panel opened up to another quite large space. I was startled and screamed loudly when I saw someone, and the people inside were also startled and screamed loudly when they saw me. After calming down, I asked that person to step out. It was a young girl with a hot body and a very thin nightgown. She tried to run away but was immediately controlled by me. I called and told Liam to go to his room immediately. I tried to stay as calm as possible when listening to the explanations from my bad husband. The other girl has been his lover for nearly 3 months, traveling with his wife, but he insisted on taking her with him. The sound of running water that first night was because she couldn't hold it in anymore and decided to use the bathroom. The rhythmic tapping sound coming from the closet is their sign when calling each other. The night Liam disappeared was to crawl into the closet to sleep with his lover. Returning home, I immediately filed for divorce. The lawsuit and evidence of adultery, asking Liam for a large amount of compensation, making him miserable. I have to thank the hotel with its unique design for helping me recognize Liam's deceitful face.
Thank you for watching until the end. As mentioned earlier, our goal of reaching 50,000 subscribers in 2026 is still ongoing. If you enjoy these stories, please give us a hand and support us.